Most board gamers tend to have a collection. Why is that? Why have more than one dungeon crawl? Why more than one 4X game? Ask any gamer and I think they'll have a reason for each one. Often you'll hear because the game looked cool or did something unique or interesting, but often you'll hear something else. Another reason given that holds more merit than simply the game struck their fancy. Often, games serve a purpose. Oh, I play one of these games if I'm playing with people who don't normally play modern board games. I have this one because my parents like the theme and it's simple. I have this one because my best friend loves long and complex games. This one has a campaign my group likes. I noticed I didn't have any sci-fi games in the genre and wanted a variety to pick from. I needed a game to play while traveling, etc., etc. Deciding what purpose a game solves for you is not the end of the discussion on whether you should buy a game or not, but it is an important starting point as it provides a real-world reason why that game would be picked to be played from your ever-growing collection of games. You want to buy a game that ends up on your table, not just on your shelf. One that provides entertainment for you and your friends and family, not shame as it sits unopened, a waste of space, a future game to sell or trade. I'd like you to keep this in mind as I give my thoughts on The Witcher Path of Destiny by Go On Board. This is the second game set in the Witcher universe by Go On Board, and at the time of posting this video, it is currently available on GameFound. Please feel free to use the link in the description below after watching this video to see more on what's actually being offered and at what price. There are many videos already covering how this game is played, and I highly encourage you to check out one of those for more clarification should you need it. But a quick rundown goes like this. You control Geralt and his friends and select a tale to play through, which is a short thematic story straight from the books and games. Throughout this tale, you'll have to pick between two options to progress the story, and you'll play cards to gain matching symbols to the path you wish to take. You'll gain new cards through drafting them from the available cards and gain victory points and experience points based on those token gains and cards played. Your cards form a tableau that you build up 2 cards at a time, ultimately being partially reset for the next round and decision paths to choose from. There are 3 turns in a round, 3 rounds in a game, and then the victor, known as the main character, is the one with the most victory points at the end. I'll be going over each main mechanic in more detail throughout this video. To start out, I'd like to address a question I believe many of you may have. Tale variety. The core game comes with 3 tales. How much gameplay is this? From a game path perspective, there are 8 endings in each one, so if a new one is seen every time, that's 24 game sessions. I've played through many of these and then looked through the rest, and they can go in wildly different directions. Edge of the World, for instance, has endings that include characters you may never meet on your first playthrough, or even your second. Lesser Evil may end with you feeling either kind of bad or really bad with everything in disaster, depending on the paths you take. Each tale is also quite different from the other. Each one includes its own small mechanics. The Striga tale has you trying to build out color combos, while Lesser Evil has you gaining alliance cards. But the differences go deeper than that and actually add twists to the game, providing an actual different feel to it. The combos kind of touch on that, but Lesser Evil is really where the concept shines. In the other 2 tales, the person who played the best to do an action such as investigate the woods or attack the elves gets rewarded. In fact, the game itself rewards this not just through story rewards, but with its own core mechanic. You get victory points for every token you have that matches a winning path. So the more, the better. Except for Lesser Evil. In this one, the more you try to do some good, the worse you feel when it goes bad. So in this tale, and this tale only, you get punished for being the first, which means everyone wants to be second best, which adds a whole new twist and feel to the game that the other 2 simply don't have. Additionally, playing at different player counts, I noticed, also changes the feel quite a bit. Playing 2 players, for instance, feels closer to something like chess, whereas a game with more people often includes short-lived alliances to undo whoever is in first, promises, offers for good draft cards, etc. The difference is quite noticeable. Here I'd like to provide 2 important notes. One is that I did not try the solo mode as I believe they are making some changes to it. The other is that I am recording this review prior to the campaign going live on GameFound, And at this time, they have stated that they are looking to add more tales. So again, feel free to check out the campaign linked below for more updated information in this regard. Commenting again on the player counts and the competitive nature of the game, please know that table talk is as strong as your group makes it. Gameplay's fine without competitive people, just trying to do the best among everyone else, but shines with a group that will actively try to outplay each other. Additionally, player count is handled well. The draft pool shrinks with lower counts, and the draft pool actually acts as a third tableau for two players to help avoid ties, and incidentally adds some strategy too, as you can see exactly what will be the result ahead of time. Unless, of course, Yennefer messes it up with her magic abilities. Speaking of which, abilities. Each character has 4 one-time use abilities. They start with the first available and unlock the rest by gaining experience points, which can come from the story, from drafting, and from playing cards or tale-specific mechanics. I actually really loved these abilities, and most games I played had everyone using theirs. They also have a good variety and are thematic as well. For instance, Yennefer does her magic stuff, and that means she's actively manipulating the draft board, moving cards around and taking ones she wants like no one else can do. Geralt, on the other hand, is very determined and focused on what he wants, and can play additional cards and even ignore token removals, often leading him to have the largest tableau of anyone. Combine this with the starting cards that favor specific paths, like Yennefer focusing on magic and having no combat cards, or Geralt being the opposite, and it naturally leads to you going towards different paths, further making each character feel unique and different. If you play Geralt for the first game and then swap to Yennefer for the second, and don't change the tale at all, you'll still have quite a different experience. Change the player count, and again, different experience. But would you want to play the same tale again? If you're like me, then yes, you'll enjoy playing through the exact same one right after you finish it. Part of this is because of the really varied paths and outcomes, of course, and part of that is because of the card play, which I'll get into soon, but I'd actually like to talk briefly about the IP and the stories this game tells. The Witcher Path of Destiny is obviously an IP branded game. Actually, scratch that. I think that's worded poorly. The game is not branded with the IP. That insinuates a game with an IP more or less slapped on. I think we've all played those games. You might recall at the start of this video, I said that this is the second game Go On Board has made with the Witcher IP. I don't believe many realize how important that piece of information is, so let me explain. Previously, Go On Board made The Witcher Old World. In my opinion, it's a fun game that has some really nice card combat mechanics and some decent questing, but I don't think anyone would claim it to be akin to being called The Witcher the board game. It fails to truly and wholly capture the whole spirit of the IP. That's not inherently a bad thing, but it's important to note because this game, Path of Destiny, I think does. You see, Go On Board already had the license for this IP. That means this game was purpose-built for the Witcher universe, for this IP. This is not an IP attached to a game. This is a game made specifically from the ground up for the IP. The stories this game tells, the what-ifs, the player choice, the conflicting desires of where to go and what to do, the focus on story, not combat, makes this feel like a true Witcher game for me. Both on the table and above the table, you feel mistrust, desire to learn the unknown, to see what this character will say or what that player will say if you promise them something. It somehow brings the Witcher universe off the table and into the group of players in a way I've rarely seen board games do. Perhaps my words are failing to truly communicate what exactly I mean here, or the gravity of what I feel it says about this game, so I'll try and say it bluntly. If you love the Witcher IP, you'll want to play this game. It's really as simple as that. This game honors the IP it's based on more than most other board games do, and certainly more than some TV shows do. But what if you don't care so much about the Witcher IP? Does the game stand on its own without that? It's a valid question, I feel, and while I've spoken of the stories, which are good regardless of the IP, just interesting situations, I'd like to end on the card play, and then a few closing thoughts, bringing the end back to the start. The tableau building and drafting are interesting. When you first look at either, it seems rather simple, perhaps a bit too simple. There's a single page list on the back of the rulebook explaining the card symbols because there's honestly not a lot. Cards can have 1 to 2 of 4 different colors. They can give you things based on whether or not you have 1 to 3 of a color, having a token to give up, or simply give tokens at no cost. That's really it. And yet in every game I played, the slowest part of the game was picking cards to draft and playing 2 cards. This slowdown, with a few players starting to enter AP, which is analysis paralysis if you didn't know, spoke volumes of the interplay and potential paths you can choose. This is, I think, helped with a few things. One of them is a higher hand count than most other games, where you often have quite a few options to pick from. Another is the length of the tableau, which gets to 8+ by the end of the game, so it can be a long sequence. Also, you have to take into account what everyone else's tableau is doing and try and judge what their next move is. Recall that swapping sides is often a big turning point in these games, where you either bandwagon on what you think will win or try and stay the course even if you think you might lose. Finally, there's the interplay between various mechanics. Your abilities usually affect the tableau. Often the tale-specific mechanics affect it as well, and even the decision between VP and XP weighs on your decision-making. As you may recall, you get VP points for each token you have of the winning path, and XP for each token you have of the losing path. Considering you can gain story buffs for having the most losing tokens, and XP can turn into VP, and you have plenty to think about with each card picked. And I'm just keeping things simple. There's table talk, side quests where you get rewarded VP for specific card colors, and more that continue to add nuance to the system. Then there's even keeping cards for the next round and discarding the rest so you lose them. It keeps you constantly trying to think ahead. I honestly think this is enough. Between the stories and the card play, even someone who isn't a huge fan of the IP still has enough, I think, to enjoy the game plenty. The one issue I saw with the card play, specifically the drafting, is if you are low on the initiative track, you just kind of get left taking whatever cards are left, so there's not much decision making there on your part in that instance for that mechanic. And while I'm listing negatives, I also found the game to be pretty fiddly with the amount of token grabbing and taking away. As you resolve your tableau, you end up grabbing tons of tokens and you resolve it 1 card at a time. It ends up being a lot of reaching. You could, if you really trust everyone, resolve all of them all at once, but regardless, it's definitely the most finicky part of the game. As an example, a card could say instantly give you 1 token of 2 types, so you grab those. Then the bottom of the card has you remove 1 token from your pool to gain 2 of another. So after grabbing the first 2, you put another back and then grab 2 more. Then the card could complete a sequence that gains you another token and an XP, so you take yet another token and then move your XP up 1. You have now resolved 1 card of potentially 8 or more. Each player will do this. Everyone has their level of acceptance with this, and I'll admit my acceptance for fiddliness is very high for this sort of thing. So while it isn't something game-breaking for me, I can see it being a huge bother for some of you. Alright, that brings us to the final part of this review, and perhaps the most important. Should you get this game? While I wish I could answer this with all of the information, I do lack some that will come in handy. I know there is a standard version and a deluxe version. I believe the standard version should remain fairly cheap. No game decision should be made based on mechanics alone. Price is important because your money is important. A game might be a great filler game, but many might not want to spend a lot of money on a filler game. Or perhaps the gameplay is so great and its spot on your shelves is so warranted that it excuses a higher price point. That decision is something you'll have to make. What I can say, however, is that this game plays quick. It sets up even quicker. I spoke at the beginning of this review around a game's purpose. For me, this is it. This is a game I can easily set up, play and enjoy casually, and is a good choice for when impromptu game night happens. For my family, that's actually the most common way we play board games. Someone suggests it randomly, and we get something and play it. I can guarantee this game will be picked for that time and time again for us. I enjoyed it in a dedicated way, but for me, it shines on those evenings when you just want to get a quick game in. Sure, the IP is great, the stories are well done, the card gameplay is fun and interesting, but its purpose is known to me now. This is the Witcher game, and it definitely has a spot on my shelf. Is it right for you? Feel free to ask any questions you may have in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. And check out the link to the GameFound campaign in the video description to make your own decision. If you liked the video and would like to see more game coverage, please consider subscribing. I cover games like this all the time. If you'd like to support my efforts here, you can do that via Patreon or a YouTube membership. That obviously helps a bunch, but regardless, thank you so much for watching and I hope my video was helpful for you.